Hello fam, these are our solutions for Can You Do 41 scatter plots. This Can You Do is a lot of writing, and we're mostly practicing following the phrases to memorize that we have in our note sheets that go along with this Can You Do. So 1 and 2 want you to identify the explanatory and response variable and also categorize it as quantitative or categorical. You can see my answers for both here. For number 2, I specified what the different treatments were. I don't think that that's necessary, but that helped me determine that it was categorical. I was a little bit confused about whether water temperature was quantitative because they used the phrase controlled at different levels. So that kind of made me wonder if they were going to use like hot, warm, whatever. But I think ultimately they would have just adjusted the temperature of the water and not labeled it as like different, not labeled it with words. They would have used, the levels would have been different temperatures. Number 3, there is a moderately strong positive linear association between IQ score and grade point average. In general, as IQ increases, GPA also increases. I circled a few unusual points on the graph. So I just said that I circled them. What is this little, oh, it's my mouse. I just said that I circled the points because I didn't want to spend the time figuring out what these are. And if you're in the AP exam and this is one of your free response questions, I would recommend that you do the same. I would not spend any time trying to estimate those 3 points. The student that has a low GPA and average IQ score, I estimated it to be 103 and about 0.25. Your book had the same as me, 103 here, but theirs was 0.4. So as long as you're less than 0.5, you're probably good on whatever your estimation was. Number 4, do heavier people burn more energy? So you'll be able to see in this one that I decided to label this graph with the title of the problem because that made more sense to me. Labeling it lean body or metabolic rate by lean body mass seemed dumb because that's exactly what we have written on our X and Y axis, and so it just seemed like, why are we going to write the same exact thing as our title? But then I realized that the question that this starts with is a really good title for the scatter plot, so that's what I used. Like I said in class, I don't think that you'll be marked wrong on a poor title to your graph, so just do the best that you can. I had to graph this one in my calculator to help me answer this question. So this is what mine looks like by hand. But then this is what it looks like in or on my calculator. And this helped me make decisions for how I would describe this association. So I have that this is a moderately strong positive linear association between lean body mass and resting metabolic rate. In general, as lean body mass increases, resting metabolic rate also increases. I think that the point at 42, 14, 18 is unusual and may be an outlier. And I had to adjust my graph, so when I first did this, it really looked like it was an outlier, but in this, he doesn't seem terribly unusual, but I think he is unusual. I also think that this guy could be considered unusual. I don't think he would be an outlier, but given the difference between these 2 points, I'm wondering if this guy is an outlier. That's why I mentioned him. Okay, number 5. This says described in problem 11 or 10. Really, it was problem 4. So this one is not necessarily asking you to follow the phrases to memorize from our notes. It's asking you some specific questions. So does the same overall pattern hold for both men and women? And what difference between the sexes do you see? And I think that you can answer both of those questions with one response, so that's what I did. When they say, does the same overall pattern exist, I interpreted pattern to be form and direction. So linear, curved, nonlinear, positive, negative. I don't think that it is asking you about strength. I think pattern is asking you about direction and form. So the pattern for both males and females is positive and linear. That is what they have in common. That is the overall pattern. However, males have a stronger association than females. So the black dots, I would categorize as a strong relationship, and the squares, the red squares for the ladies, I would categorize as weak or maybe moderately strong. So the males definitely have a stronger association, and males tend to have a lower lean body mass. If you look at the males' points, most of them are to the left. If you look at the female points, theirs are more toward the right. If you added anything else and it is logical and makes sense, then that is totally okay. I would at least note the 3 things that I have noted. Pattern is the same, males have a stronger association, and males tend to have a lower lean body mass. Number 6 is our first one that has a negative association. There's a strong negative linear association between percent of trees harvested and the density of red squirrels. In general, as the percent of trees harvested increases, the squirrels per plot decreases. You do not have to say density of red squirrels there. You could just say squirrels per plot. Squirrels is a really weird word, now that I'm saying that out loud 50 times. You guys should say that word a couple of times. That guy's weird. You don't have to say density of. I just thought it was a better description for this sentence and then used the labels for the rest. Number 7. So number 7, you can see on my response that I at first thought that this would be a moderately strong association. And then I did the next problem, and I thought, I don't think that that's a strong association. I think that I would label this as weak. But then why wouldn't I label this as weak? And I feel like I had a harder time identifying this as a weak association because there were so many points on this graph, whereas it was easier to see because there were less points. So then I was like, well, maybe I should check my notes to see what's happening there. So I pulled up our notes, and when I compared this plot to this plot, they looked very similar to me. In fact, without this point right here, these plots seem the same to me. So I changed my descriptor to a weak positive linear association for number 7. I said between the houses, the size of houses for sale and the selling price. In general, as size increases, price also increases. And I feel confident that this point is an outlier. And I used a rough estimate. So I put it at 4,500, even though I'm pretty sure it's a little bit more than 4,000 and maybe a little bit more than 500. But this, to me, is definitely an outlier. This guy, these guys are a maybe, because they're out of the pattern, but they're not they're not like drastically farther away than the points next to them. So that's why they might be an outlier. I wouldn't be surprised if they are, but this I can confidently say is an outlier. There is a weak positive linear association between child's IQ test score and child reading test score. In general, as IQ score increases, reading score also increases, and I feel confident that this child down here at about 24 and 10 is also, or is an outlier. I shouldn't say also an outlier, is an outlier. And then our last question took me 10 years to answer, and I erased several times because I was struggling with the wording. This question is a previously asked question on an AP exam. So before we go through this question, I just want to acknowledge that this question is very challenging. It was a free response question, and I wouldn't expect you to be able to write the response that I have until you have seen a question like the one we're about to talk about. So once you get to the AP exam, you are going to have to think very critically and take some chances with your responses. But hopefully you've been exposed to enough problems at that point that you feel comfortable doing that. So if this were a problem that you saw in your AP exam, you would have needed to think critically and trust yourself when you're answering this question, even if you're not 100% sure that that's what they're asking for. That's what I mean by take chances. So you want to describe what you see and make sure that it's accurate and take the chance that it's what they're asking for, because sometimes you just don't know. So in this one, I have that there is a weak, positive, non-linear association between price of a sewing machine and its quality rating. And here's the reason why I'm saying non-linear instead of curved. Because to me, the only, well, I guess not the only thing, but this point to me is the one that's really leading me to believe that it's curved. But I guess if you left that out, you'd still have this slight flattening here. But it seems even more severe like this. So the key allows you to say both. The released solutions for this problem says you can say curved or nonlinear. I chose nonlinear because of the reason I stated. Now this is where you would have needed to take some chances and just describe what you see. So if you cut the graph at $500, the sewing machines that cost less than $500 appear to have little association. So if I cover this up, that to me almost looks like no association. In fact, I lean toward no association. But when you add in the sewing machines that cost more than $500, that's what starts to form the overall positive direction of this association. So what I ended up deciding on was saying for sewing machines that cost less than $500, there is very little association between price and quality rating. I decided to say very little association as opposed to no association because when you see the whole graph, the overall pattern, or sorry, the overall direction is positive. I personally would not mark you wrong for saying no association, and I'm not sure if the AP board would have. So there's that. So I say there appears to be very little association, less than $500, but the machines that cost more than $500 generally have better quality ratings. In fact, there's only 2 that don't, and I circled those. So that's 67% of these sewing machines had better ratings than these sewing machines. This is what gives the overall appearance of positive association. And that is a complete answer that would earn full credit. We can't really say as X increases, Y increases, because it's not, that's not necessarily the best description of what's happening. Overall, and I've stated that, overall, there is positive association, but really less than 500 is not so much, and more than 500 is, I would say, definitively a positive association. If you did say, in general, as price increases, quality rating also increases, that would be completely right. You would get 100%. They just didn't require you to write that on this problem. So, usually problems are very straightforward. You know exactly, well, I shouldn't make that assumption, but you can usually figure out what they're asking you for. And that's what you're seeing in the first 8 problems in this assignment. And then once we get to this last problem is challenging. It is meant to make you struggle a little bit, but hopefully when you now see the solution, you feel comfortable with the solution that they were expecting in this case. You have a quiz that will go along with this Can You Do. I've adjusted the numbering on all of your stuff so that the numbering matches the unit that we're in. So the quiz that you'll be taking with this is quiz 41, even though the last quiz we took was 11. I want the Can You Do's to match the number of the quiz. So on this quiz, you will be timed, so hopefully you're watching this so you have a heads up. I'm thinking I'm going to give you 15 minutes. You will make a scatter plot and you will have one multiple choice question. So you're going to have a multiple choice question, you're going to make a scatter plot and describe it. And it's not going to be a funky scatter plot where you have like the one that's behind me that you can see. It's going to be a scatter plot that you're not going to have to struggle over how to describe it. It's to see if you know what you're supposed to write when you describe a scatter plot. So one multiple choice question, one make the scatter plot and describe it, no tricks, none of that, just straightforward, verifying that you guys know the sentence frames and can use them. Okay, that's it. Love you. Hopefully this was helpful. I'm glad it wasn't 10 million hours long.